Hi and welcome to Next Stage Tutorials. In today's lesson, I'm going to be talking to you about injuries and what you can do to get back on the ice sooner. Injuries are by far the worst part of skating, or any sport for that matter. They're painful, they're annoying, they're frustrating, and they can really just get you down once you are injured. But if we're going to skate, we are going to get injured. So in today's lesson, I want to walk you through the steps of being injured all the way to being healthy again and show you that it isn't as bad as it may seem. So let's jump in and let's walk through these steps. Okay, step number one, the injury happens. Now in my experience, there's two different types of injuries that commonly occur. There's the serious ones that happen very all of a sudden. It might be a crash, it might be a fall from a jump. Usually there's a loud bang and you can sort of turn around and see who fell over. Those injuries are really the worst types of injuries because they're so unexpected. They usually result in maybe a broken bone, a fracture, a split open part of our body that requires stitches, and these injuries are really, really bad. But the most important thing that you do when those happen is safely try to get to the barrier. And why I suggest that is if you are fallen over in the middle of the ice, you're still susceptible to someone else hitting you. So an injury on top of another injury, and you just don't want that. You're already injured. If you can, make your way to the barrier. If you can't, try to get someone's attention, and maybe they can help you get to the barrier and then seek first aid. So those are the more serious injuries. The other types of injuries that I've seen is usually from a lot of repetition. So maybe sore knees, sore ankle, pulled muscle from overworking. And those injuries are a lot less severe most of the time. And it's usually because of just a lot of hard work, a lot of attempts on jumps. And we usually see those slowly creep in. So maybe one day your knee's a little bit tender, but it's not too bad, and you continue to work like you normally would. The next day, it's a little bit worse. The day after, even worse. 1 or 2 weeks later, and you feel like you can't even walk. So those injuries you just have to really be mindful of. But the main part of this is the injury has happened, you have to accept it, and then get ready for step 2 and move on to that. Okay, the injury's happened. Now it's time for step number 2. After the injury, you want to find a doctor, physiotherapist, a specialist, anyone that you trust or anyone that's been recommended to you that you can go and get the injury assessed. You need to find out what has actually gone wrong and what is the problem with your body. You can guess if you have the knowledge. Sometimes skaters know their body and they've had this injury before, so they might know, oh look, it's not too bad, it's just a couple of days. But if you're new to skating, definitely go get it checked out. If you don't know your body that well yet and you're just new to figure skating, injuries can be different from person to person. So don't just trust if someone says to you, oh, it's just a rolled ankle, a couple days, it could be okay. Don't trust it. For them, it might be. For you, it's completely different. So go get it checked out. Now, when you get it checked out by a specialist, physiotherapist, doesn't matter, try to understand what the problem is. Once you understand what the problem is, hopefully they're able to give you a time frame and the steps that you need before you can even think about getting back on the ice. Once you've got the steps, then you can start to set up a plan about how to go about it. In my experience, it normally starts with resting it to try and get some inflammation down, and then you can move on through there. Now, once you have that, talk to them about, is there anything I can be doing besides resting? Maybe I could be doing some exercises to strengthen it. Maybe I need to stretch it to keep it flexible. Maybe I need to ice it. Whatever you need to do, talk to the specialist, figure it out, and then try to come up with a plan to progress from there. Okay, step number 3. Now you've had the injury, you've seen the specialist, you've got some information. Now the most important part, I believe, is rest. You have to rest your body to get back to functioning. If you don't rest your body, then you could be in all sorts of trouble. Going back to the ice too soon usually leads to another injury. So why risk going back to the ice if you can just stay home, rest, make sure your body's recouped enough, and then you can think about doing some exercises. Potentially the specialist has said, hey, while you're resting, you can still do these exercises to help build up some strength around the injured area. Maybe that involves some stretching, some walking, who knows? But whatever the specialist says, usually they have the experience and they know what's best for you in that situation. Now, in my experience, it could be just keeping active is enough. So maybe some gentle walking, depending on what the injury is. And that way it'll keep your mind still exercising. It keeps you functioning. You're not just sitting there lethargic, getting tired and going a little bit crazy. I know I do if I'm injured. So that's the most important part in this time. Resting, feeling good about your body, getting back to normal, doing those exercises that maybe the specialist recommended if you can. All right, step number 4. Now this period is a really interesting period. So you've had the injury, you've seen a specialist, you've rested. Now at this point in time, you're probably not back to 100%. You're probably still feeling a little sore. Maybe it's not as bad as it was, but the doctor or specialist has said you can go back to training. Usually at this point, they'll try and tell you about things to avoid. So let's say, for example, you've rolled your ankle and maybe it's your landing foot. So the doctor said to you, hey, you can go and train, you can go and skate, but try and stay away from anything that is high impact. So immediately I think, oh no, I can't jump because that's high impact. If I'm landing on my right foot, my landing foot, and that's the foot that I've rolled over on, and it really hurts to land, I can't jump, so why even go skating? And this is the point where a lot of skaters miss it. Yes, you can't jump. Yes, you can't do 6 jumps, axle flip, lutz, any of those. You can't land on that leg. But then what I like to think about is, what can I do? Am I the world's best spinner? Definitely not. Am I the world's best skater? Absolutely not. Am I good at choreography? I'm okay at it. So I've automatically got 3 things that I can work on. So for the next however long, maybe it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, it doesn't matter. Make a plan and try to improve on the things that you don't normally have time to do. Maybe you aren't allowed to spin. Okay, that's fine. Maybe you can jump. Maybe you aren't allowed to skate really fast. That's okay. Maybe you can do some patterns and work on your pattern test. So always try and find the things that you are allowed to do as opposed to not allowed to do and work on them. Because I think you will find that often when you have an injury, the things that you are allowed to do are usually the things that you don't like doing. That was the case for me anyway. Whenever I was injured, I always found that the doctor would say, hey, you're allowed to do this, and I always didn't want to do it. But I found time, I made it a priority, I did those things, I got better at those things. And then eventually when I was back to normal, those things that were a weakness were all of a sudden a strength. Then I went back to doing the things that I wanted to do, and they became another strength. So it's always just improving the things that you don't want to do, improving the things that you can do, and slowly after a while, your whole foundation builds up. You become a really, really great skater. Something to think about, something that's interesting, but it definitely works a lot better if you can change that mindset and attack that and think about it from that sort of frame of mind, as opposed to, oh, I can't do anything. I'm not allowed to do the things I want to do. Why even go skating? So think about it, because that's something that can really change the way you think about an injury. It can make it a lot less worrisome and really take the burden off that injury when you think about it. All right, step number 5. Now this step doesn't always happen, but oftentimes it can if we're not careful. And it's all about the setback with an injury. So let's say that everything's going well, everything's feeling better. Each day you notice progress in your injury. So it's not as sore as it was 2 days ago. It wasn't sore as a week ago, but you have a setback. And usually that might be a little accident, or maybe you overwork it. Extremely common, very, very common. But all you have to do is reassess. So maybe it needs some ice, maybe it needs some more rest. Maybe if you finish skating on a Thursday, maybe don't skate the Friday, have the whole weekend off, as opposed to just having 2 days off. So really something to think about, but if you play it smart, usually you will come back stronger. What you don't want to do is get into this frame of mind and think, no, I'm going so well now, I'm working on the things that I'm allowed to work on, I just got to keep going, keep going, keep going. That's when we notice injuries come back and start to creep back in, and then all of a sudden you're back at square one and you need to go see the specialist again. So be aware of this, listen to your body. If it needs a rest, give it a rest. If it needs some ice, give it some ice. Try to listen to your body, ask for more advice from the specialist, see what they think about it if you notice the injury creeping back in. Usually it's not a bad sign, just sometimes we hit a little speed bump on the road to recovery, and we just need to be careful and listen to our body for a few days. All right, and the last step, you're back to 100% full training with a healthy body. And this is the part that all skaters want to get to. If you've got a healthy body, healthy mind, healthy everything, you can train how you want to train. If you're not healthy, it's a really frustrating period and you just want to get back to feeling healthy so you can do whatever you want. Now, again, there's going to be setbacks, but getting back to here is the main goal. Once here, it's really important that you then sit down and try and think, how can I avoid this injury again? So if it's a repetition thing, maybe limit yourself on certain elements that you feel caused that injury. Or if it was an accident thing and you maybe hit someone or you fell over or just something freakish happened, be aware of that. Be aware of that and be more open to those things happening in the future. So maybe make sure before getting on the ice, you're more awake, you're more alert. That way you can see those dangers coming. So really something to think about. But if you can make sure that you're aware of how the injury happened, going forward, you can maintain that healthiness and that injury-free period for longer and longer periods before your next injury. Now, your next injury will probably happen, unfortunately, as you get better, because you'll start to push things faster, harder, higher, more difficult entries, more difficult jumps and spins. So injuries will creep in, but if you've got a plan in place to prevent them for as long as possible, you're gonna feel a lot happier and a lot healthier. Okay, there you have it. Those are my steps for getting you healthy again and back into training. Now, the number one thing that I have to emphasize is that injuries are gonna happen. No matter how much you stretch, how much you cool down, warm up, train properly, eat properly, sleep properly, injuries are unpreventable sometimes. They're just gonna happen, and that's just a part of sport. Understanding that and moving forward with that is the most important thing. And how you cope with those injuries and bounce back from them is the absolute pinnacle of sport. I've seen a lot of great skaters get injured and they just can't make it back for whatever reason. And I've seen other skaters who just deal with injuries amazing. They recover really quickly because they're so good at it, and then they come back to the ice and they just seem to get better and better and better. So again, dealing with injuries is almost like as much a part of it as skating and our skating skills are. So if you can figure out ways to deal with it and move forward, you're gonna feel great in the future. Well, there you have it. That's our lesson on injuries. I really hope you got something out of it. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you're injured, please take your time, rest, whatever you have to do to get back on the ice and feeling healthy again.